don't know if your listeners want to hear about pails of blood, but
I was introduced to pails of blood when I told you about that little story where I was asked to kill some cows for a farm. But why don't you tell me about that?
well, yeah, there's multi-use at the slaughterhouse. So there's like an Eastern European tradition and a British tradition, French tradition for making blood sausage, I guess. Like, so I think culinary tradition, not just European and Asian, yeah. So pork blood traditionally for blood sausage. I had never thought about the blood pudding, although there was a culinary friend in a cooking competition prepared exactly that. I think it was like a blood mousse, but flavored with cocoa. So it
Mm.
was the richness of cooked blood, but blended with cocoa and sugar to make a sweet blood custard, which is pretty
Huh.
like that's pretty challenging for the
Uh-huh.
North American palate. But man, if that animal has to die, and there are folks that want to or are at least curious about exploring how you can use that for food, I think all power to them. Being the owner of a slaughterhouse, we have an immense amount of available blood, and it just generally goes down the drain. And we hadn't thought about it for years, except for occasionally harvesting blood to sell to some restaurants for blood sausage. But one of my daughters was in, I don't know, in early high school, early biology 10 or something like that, and they were somehow the topic came up. They were talking about the nutritional qualities of blood for soil and soil building. And so of course the slaughter daughters were at work on a Friday, and she wanted to experiment. So I went to Home Depot and bought like 10 orange Home Depot 5-gallon pails because we didn't have any good ones kicking around. And we ended up with 5-gallon pails of beef blood that we saved and put in the back of the truck to take home to add to our compost pile
Huh.
to see what would happen, because we noticed on the farm, if we've done any on-farm slaughters, wherever blood is spilled, vegetation just jumps out of the ground. It's just electric. As soon as there's just so much nitrogen, and then the micronutrients in blood
Mm.
also that are accumulated by a mammal is exactly kind of what the root system needs in almost all plants to really grow to put carbon dioxide and water to work and build healthy root systems. So on our compost pile, we took 25 gallons of beef blood, and the pile heated up almost immediately. There's like a whole bunch of weird things. The blood clotted in the pail, so it was like pouring out this weird red silk scarf onto our lawn clipping pile. Five
Hmm.
gallon red silk scarves in these kind of pieces of big bright red jello with swirling. Like, you kind of get lost in it if you stare into a blood clot from a freshly killed animal.
Huh.
And then we turned it over in the grass, and within a couple of hours, we went back and checked after supper. The pile was just steaming. So the microbiology in the pile of compost was also electrified to just sort of melt down. It went into nuclear
Wow.
meltdown mode with having all of that nutrition and the water available. It meant that the microbiome or whatever living in our compost pile loved it. And that compost was used on a experimental food forest garden, and the plants, exactly what we expected would happen. The plants are just jumping out of the soil. So anyway, it's just a huge contemplative thing. We said we used to think that to have an apple tree grow or to put in a perennial raspberries or something like that, we would dig down into our horrible boreal forest soil. This used to be just a mixed wood boreal, but most of the farmland here is an eighth of an inch of topsoil and then clay where we live. There's low spots where leaves have blown off the poplar trees and accumulated over the years where the topsoil is a few centimeters, but not much more than that. So instead of digging down to plant plants, we spot with our wine growing friend in Summerland, BC, and that place is a desert.
Mm-hmm.
And their innovative ideas, the approach to viticulture was build upwards instead of digging down. Let the plant dig down if it wants, but build your soils on top of the surface. So lay down cardboard or mulch, and then mulch on top of it, and put your composts on top of that to build a new layer of soil. And so the compost with blood in it was absolutely mental. And it's funny because it's October, I don't know, 10th? Yeah,
Yeah.
October 10th today. And of the food forest experiment that I did with my daughter Annika, we were just out harvesting the last of the strawberries from her food forest. And that is absolutely not normal for Alberta at this time of year. But there's heat
Wow.
coming out of the compost still.
No kidding.
So despite having, yeah, we've had a couple of heavy frosts, but because of there's heat in the soil, and her nasturtiums, I think, kind of blanketed the strawberries with their foliage. So there are ripe strawberries that she's picking just today after kill we stopped at the strawberry patch and picked some strawberries out of the blood compost. So it's sort of like a weird full circle story about getting strawberries out of blood because it activated the compost to throw off heat. You could stick your hands into the dirt in her food forest, this dirt on top of cardboard that we started in May, I think, or we heaped up in May, and it's still hot. The soil is warm to the touch.
Wow.
Right. So that's a miracle of what surrounds us.